Talking about the release of the grains, he just mentioned that, well, what are they releasing? Just grains. And he mentioned quite a number of food items that they have lost, you know, in the course. So how would government also intervene in such, in those areas?
Well, let me quickly say that it's the grains that can be stored easily. If you talk about vegetables like tatase, like tomatoes, like all those that he mentioned, they cannot really be stored except when they are processed, when they are packaged, when they are canned. But the processing has not really been going on, except a few interventions of certain industries, certain companies that have been going into that in Bauchi State, in Kogi, and in one or two other areas. Coming up with is it fed through or those things, you know. So except by the time we now move towards increased manufacturing in agriculture, then we can then be able to store all those. But let me also say that the issue of the insurgents there could also mean that we need to concentrate in so many other areas of this country that have a level of comparative advantage in the production of various commodities. Of course, we give credit to the northeastern part of the country for all what they have been producing, but we should also encourage some other areas using some incentives, some economic incentives, using some policies to also gear up the production. Howbeit, it may mean increased level of technology to be used, but nevertheless, we can also do this while we are still combating the issue of insecurity.
Now, most of those products produced in the north, is it possible they can be grown, perhaps here in the east?
God that brought this country together brought it in such a way that we must appreciate each other. There are vegetational exchange differences in crops. It is not possible for the man in Lagos State here to grow onions as much as possible like the man in Aleru. It is not possible for the man who is in Akoko Edo to grow yam like the man in Nasarawa, Igomu, or Doma, or Kiana here. Not even the most favorable soup called egusi. If you take away Taraba, Zing, and take away Niger State, Nigerians will not have egusi to eat. So the zones, each zones here has advantage of crops to grow. And this is why what has brought this country together is more than what divides us. It is very, very possible that government should find a way to use agriculture as a unifying factor and economic incentive to take this country to where we should be. We are backwards, we lagged behind. Every single 6 hours we consume 1 billion naira worth of rice in this country. And something is worse than importation, corruption, excessive importation. You take your labor to Cambodia, you take your labor to China, and you take your labor to South Korea. Maybe now we're going to Brazil to go and bring in rice to ourselves here. Now that the armed forces and the security are on top of their game in Borno, this is the time we should come back to get back youth in Borno, Yobe, Adamawa as an station officers. What we call Wakili Noma and Wakili Ndabobi is the life wire of agriculture. I said it here and I will repeat it again. It is time that government began to look at the female folks in the north and began to give them female rago, which is Balani, and the male here, to enable them start rebreeding because they've lost all their livestock here. There's the normal parable that the Igbo man says that you don't start learning how to wrestle at old age. What is the culture of the people is what you have to go back to them, and also strengthen the institutional activities here. The youth in Borno, which is called the civilian JTF here, how do you combine the militancy of these young men into food productivity? They said we are 180 million people, but any person who stays in this country will know we're over 250 million people here. 250 million mouths that must eat every day. I was just telling Prof that 212 trucks of cow comes to Lagos State every week, and not even the bone goes back for our feed mill. And everything is eaten here. And when a full cow is slaughtered in Nigeria, you've displaced 45 children from school sandal. And that's what we eat here as pomo. Here. I am saying that the policies that we have in this country on agriculture have not put any structure to show that we have transformation program is grammar.
All right. We'll get to that stage. Now, Professor Okuneye, now you are an agricultural economist. Now, at what point will food crisis get to, to prompt the federal government to actually, get out the grains from the reserve?
Well, the National Bureau of Statistics normally release inflation rates, all those things. Let's give it to them that they are near it. By the time the prices are rising, and they do their household survey on weekly basis, I think those are the information, as well as the Federal Ministry of Agriculture too, they also gather some information. I think those are the various criteria they normally use. But they need to go far more than that. It's not just relying on such. Looking at even the levels of production, looking at the movement from the rural areas to urban areas, they will know that agricultural volumes are decreasing. And with that, they should now know that they need to also release some grains. But what's their capacity? What's the capacity of grains they can release? They have a maximum of 250 metric tons storage that they could release. And that is damn too small for this country. And so it means that the Nigerian government, both at the federal and the state level, should devise ways of increasing their levels of production. As my brother rightly said the other time, of course we have levels of comparative advantage in production of these commodities. One area has a higher level of comparative advantage vis-a-vis another area for different commodities. And so we need to really try our best to ensure that each area produces as at when necessary, and the various production undergo the value chain process. So that it's not just we just produce and just go straight to table, but we need to store. And that means we need to increase our level of production. The issue of insecurity needs to be handled very quickly and to be solved. By the time that one is solved, then about 1/8 of this country could now go back into production, because Yobe, Borno, Adamawa, and some other neighboring states, they represent about 1/8 of the land area of this country, and they need, they really need
just to support, just to shed more light to what Prof is saying. You cannot in any way talk about food production. 75% of our silos in the countries are empty.
Yeah.
Here.
Sure.
But
So
how many silos do we really have?
We have silos. There is no state in the country that do not have silos. But what we're saying is not building silos.
Yeah.
Because each minister of agriculture that we have in this country will build a silo. And the silo is not even produced in Nigeria. It's imported from China and is in stock. But we're saying that...
And they have different volumes.
Of different volumes. I said, who have the tools? Bombay, a small community in India, has got 34,000 tractors, functional tractors. The tractors we have in this country are not up to 34,000 put together, all here. But what I'm saying is that a nation that do not have conditioning center for the perishables, over 30,000 metric tons of onions are grown in Giroyo in Sokoto State. But they don't find their way to the market. 30% of it on post-harvest losses are destroyed before they get to the market.
Well, how do you preserve those perishables?
The preservation, the technology is there. There are two ways. If you cannot steal the technology, you buy it. If you cannot buy it, you copy it. And then there are no programs for you to even bring in this here. What is the programs for you to bring in, replace the aging farmers? The average age of a Nigerian farmer is about 60, 75 years that do not have the capacity to raise shovel here. Agriculture in Nigeria, the way it's been painted and the way it's been designed by those that have been handling their affairs, is designed as an occupation for those who have failed in urban pursuit to go home to do it with wickedness. That's what agriculture is.
Talking about preservation, we need to encourage the various private sector companies to really go into this. And government can give some economic incentives for them. The private sector can do more than what they are doing now. But the incentives are not sufficient for them. In terms of the security, in terms of the water supply, in terms of power, in terms of even roads, all those will excite the private sector to do more in agriculture.
All right.